Okay, great. So we're already recording. I'll call the meeting to order. It's 1:08 p.m. Um, so we do have quorum. Laurel Johnson is here. I'm here. Judge Hall is here. Deirdre Marie Iha is here. Carol Lockwood. I see Jerry Hasegawa, Thaddeus Pham, Sienna Golano, Dr. Fraterelli, Jeff Esmond, and we have Lauren Kim and Sean Taylor. So again, usual thing, if you are in the room, we're all appearing virtually. So if you're in a room with someone who's 18 or older or someone under 18 who has a personal interest in any issue before the task force, please make that disclosure now. Otherwise, I will move on. If there's any member of the public who wants to testify with respect to any agenda item, you can use the raise hand function. I'm gonna assume, unless anyone in the waiting room wants to raise their hand right now, that there's no one who wants to testify about this first item, which is just the roll call. But I can continue to explain a little bit. So today, before I move on to the rest of the agenda items, we do have several members of the public who wanted to testify. And last time at our meeting, we had a bit of a time crunch going on. So to save time, I'm going to ask that the birth heritage pig, or any pig, do their presentation first. Then once that's done, task force members, please save your questions. We'll hear from the members of the public first. And I'm going to limit the members of the public to 3 minutes each to speak. And if you've already submitted written testimony, I'd also ask that you don't just repeat what you have in your written testimony, because that's been made available to everybody. So try to keep your comments brief, and if anything, under 3 minutes. This is again for members of the public. When public testimony is done, then I'll open up questions from the task force members, so you can ask questions of the pigs, have discussions amongst ourselves, or if you want to ask any member of the public a question, we can put them back in the room and have pose a question to them. But otherwise, once you're done speaking, members of the public, you're going to be back in the waiting room. We're also going to have the chat function turned off for this meeting for the public. Again, even if we had it on, those chats are not part of the public record, so it can't be accessed again anyway. Yeah, so unless anyone has raised their hand wanting to speak about the roll call item, I will move on. Oh, sorry, one other thing. On the agenda, we also have the creation of the drafting pig on, and because we weren't able to do that last time, there's a chance we might not get to that today too, because of the birth heritage discussion. Just to let everyone know, but please think about volunteering for the pig. And as the chair, I can tell people to join too. So yeah, just if you think you want to join the pig, just keep that in mind. I think I'll definitely be asking Judge Hall to join, because she's the drafter of the main draft we've been working on. And then Sian and I also have to be part of it. So that leaves us with, I think, 5 more spots, because we can have up to 8 members. Okay. All right. So with that, Brandon, no hands up right now.
No raised hands.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so let's move to item B1A, which is the birth heritage pig continued discussion on their concepts and recommendations. So I'll let the birth heritage pig go first. I'm not sure which of you wants to talk first, but yeah, go ahead.
Okay, Carol and Jeff and Lauren's here too. I don't know, are we flipping a coin or what?
No, you should go, Laura. You should go.
Oh, I'm being
You had
nominated.
yours was considered the official report. Mine was just an individual statement.
Okay. Okay, well, all right. I'll just dive in then.
Oh, you're muted, Laurel.
This is why, yeah. I usually show up in person. Anyway, I'm not going to read the report. Actually, the report as the form that Jeff and I collaborated on has kind of been the same for the last few submissions. So I'm not going to really go over that. I think the main point is that we do support the Article 9 that was incorporated by the ULC and adopted in January of 2024 of this year. I want to read a statement, and I apologize for some of my blundering. I'm not a trained lawyer, and it's sort of intimidating to have to speak in front of a bunch of trained lawyers. So I will do my best. I will try not to blunder through this, but there's some things that I wanted to mention personally in my personal perspective. And the first thing I wanted to say is I wanted to acknowledge that all 5 members of our group, they did participate and people did share their perspectives, both personally and professionally. So I do appreciate that. And I do encourage you to read, if you didn't, both position papers as well as, I guess, the testimony that's been coming in the last couple of days. I feel compelled, and this may seem kind of out of order, because if you didn't read both position papers, I'm going to be talking to some of the points actually that Carol made that I wanted to either respectfully disagree or just point out maybe what I thought were some inconsistencies with it. So, but essentially, yes, Jeff and I do support Article 9, which allows donor-conceived persons upon reaching the age of 18 to request and receive the identity of their donors used in their conception. And it's based on apparently several years of discussion at the Uniform Law Commission. And it was also based on the enactment of a law in California that's currently being implemented. Colorado, I'm sorry, not California, Colorado. In part of Carol's opposition report, she actually makes a valid point that I think actually supports our position. And she's quoting from a study that says the most significant harm to donor-conceived individuals appears to result from family secrecy. Late discovery of an individual's donor-conceived status leads to feelings of betrayal and implies shame. This is exactly the same shadow that covered closed adoption for many, many years. This conclusion is supported by recent research and published articles that I provided and then Jeff reviewed, attached to our Birth Heritage Pig report. And again, I hope you will look at some of those articles. I'm also going to quote a few studies, additional studies that I found in the interim. One is a University of Cambridge, UK 20-year study of donor-conceived children. It was published in 2023. And I'll remind you that UK was the first country to recognize and approve donor identity release in 2005. This study, and I quote, "The landmark study finds no difference in psychological or quality relationships between children born of ART and those born naturally. However," it's a big however, "findings suggest that telling children about their biological origins early can be advantageous for family relationships and healthy adjustments." They further continue, "There does seem to be a positive effect of being open with children when they are young about their conception. It's something that's been shown by studies of adoptive families too." Another study published in 2021, this is from Harvard Medical School Center for Bioethics, survey of individuals conceived through donor techniques about the nature of their conception. There was a survey of 140 individuals, of which 94% were conceived anonymously. About 23 of those respondents were informed before age 18. 57% were informed between the ages of 19 and 49, and 21% found out after the age of 50. So that means there was a total of 78% that discovered their conception after 19, they were adults. Almost 85% of those people reported a shift in their, quote, "sense of self" upon learning the nature of their conception. About 50% sought psychological help to cope. Nearly 74% said they often or very often think about the nature of their conception. This is literally some of the same dynamics that happen with people in closed adoption. It's the secrecy that's the problem. I found a couple other articles. In 2023, the Atlantic magazine featured a letter in their therapist column. They have a therapist that writes a column every month about emerging social issues. The letter was from a mother. She had given birth to a child from the sperm donation of her adult stepson because her husband that she had married had a prior vasectomy, so they couldn't have children through her husband. However, their daughter was now 30. They had never disclosed the stepson's true relationship, and they were concerned that a family member or DNA would reveal the truth to their daughter. So this therapist wrote, "Family secrets have a way of being felt even if they are unspoken. Many people who grew up with family secrets said that they always had a sense that something was not as it seemed, and that this resulted in chronic unease." Now, the therapist continued for almost 2 pages about giving words of comfort and support to this mother and said, yes, you need to please disclose this as soon as possible. It's going to be difficult. But in the closing paragraph, this is what was said. As you free your family from its long-held secret, you might feel less anxious about approaching your daughter if you remember that there will be many conversations to follow, and that the truth, no matter how messy, is what makes people feel safe and connected. I found another article in 2023 Parents Magazine. It's entitled 10 Things Donor-Conceived Children Want Parents to Know. It was written by a therapist who has 2 decades of experience working with donors and also support groups for families with donor-conceived children. This is part of what she said, quote, "Even when the child is biologically connected to one parent, they still wonder about their origins. One study found nearly 74% of donor-conceived children think about the nature of their conception. It is also true that they may want to find their donor and/or donor-related siblings, but that does not mean that they want to see them as their family." This is the most important part of what she said, quote, "It's their own information. Always remember that the donor information belongs to your child. As they get older, because these children grew up, right, become adults, they will develop their own thoughts about who and when they want to tell others. That is their choice." Now, there's another advocate, and he's a pretty popular guy, particularly among the adoption community. His name is Dr. Henry Louis Gates. He's out of Harvard. And he has a genealogy project, and he's made it into a television series called Finding Your Roots. He often features African-American celebrities who are curious about their family tree. And most often, their family trees are truncated because their roots trace back in our country to slavery. Dr. Gates' purpose, besides telling an important part of American history, is to give these people the truth, even when it is not a happy story. He often asks the participants, "How does it feel to know this information?" They most often respond, something like, "It makes me feel whole. It fills an empty place inside of me." I think most people would agree that birth heritage is their information to own and confirms that they and their descendants belong to a lineage greater than themselves. There are 2 other points that I wanted to make about what Carol had written. She categorizes Article 9 as a mandatory disclosure and asserts that children will not be born if disclosure is allowed, about which I must strongly disagree. The language of Article 9 requires record retention by gamete banks and fertility clinics, which they already have to do, and the release of donor's identity to the donor-conceived adult upon their request. It's upon their request. It is not something that is sent out into the public or anywhere if the person doesn't request it. This is very similar to what we did with Hawaii law around sealed adoption records. The only people that see those are the parties to the adoption, and it's the adoptee upon request at age 18 that gets to see that information. When I hear mandatory disclosure, I think it's typically done before we engage in some type of transaction of some import. In ART, from what I've understood in listening, the donors and the prospective legal parents receive relevant disclosures in terms to which they must agree in order to proceed. But it is impossible for a donor-conceived person to be a party to the disclosure, clearly, although they are certainly the product of the transaction. Thus, Article 9 cannot and will not prevent any child's existence. I just don't believe that. Finally, Carol does mention that she thinks art is not adoption. Well, I agree that the mechanism is different for becoming a legal parent, but the impacts of anonymity are strikingly similar, as mentioned in some of the articles that I quoted earlier and some of the other articles that I sent. The impact of missing birth heritage, health, and medical information on a donor-conceived person's life reflects the same void experienced by adoptees raised in a closed adoption. Similar to adoptees, donor-conceived persons gave no consent to keeping secrets for their donors nor for their legal parents. There are several national and international organizations that have been developed and established that support both adoptees and donor-conceived persons seeking their birth heritage information. I listed some of these organizations again on the resource sheet that I attached to our birth heritage report. And I have to say, although Carol and I have disagreements, I understand she's coming from a very different perspective as a mother than I am. And I'm just here to remind you why I'm advocating for this. I'm advocating for the party that is forgotten in this existing parentage law. It's the donor-conceived child who's being denied their birth heritage. And I apologize if I'm repeating myself because I don't know if I told you actually how long I've been doing this. I've been doing this since 1989. That's when we first started advocating for adoptees to have access to their sealed adoption records. As I mentioned, I'm a product of the secrecy imposed by sealed records upon me, my adoptive parents, and my birth mother. And none of them asked for this. I knew I was adopted. I was read the Chosen Child book and all the books about how special I was. I often found it ironic, though, that one of the sentences they use is, well, your birth mother loved you, so she gave you away. That's a little oxymoronic if you think about it. But anyway, the reason why I got involved in this is I knew I was adopted, but I was a Girl Scout. My parents wanted to make sure that I had some upbringing in Girl Scouts. And so part of Girl Scouts, though, was to do your family tree. Well, I was aware enough at that point in my life that I was adopted. They were not my genetic parents. I must have a family tree out there. So I was going to do my family tree. And interestingly, my mom, my adopted mom, had been doing hers on both sides of her family. And she said, okay, well, we'll do yours. Well, we had no idea about sealed records, right? I mean, so we were trying to figure out how to get this information. Well, of course, we were denied. The state denied us. And that Girl Scout project never got done, or I might have turned in my adoptive parents one. I don't really remember at this point, but it wasn't the truthful one. But being the type of person that I was and that I am, I persisted. And so at age 33, I did finally meet my birth mother. So this was the result. As the result, our family construct grew by one person, my birth mother, who we were very blessed to know. However, the process of searching and being denied information over and over and over again that I believed was mine, and that, by the way, my adoptive father thought it was ours too. It did really have an emotional and physical toll on me. And so much so that I continue since 1989 to do this work because I believe I'm fighting on behalf of children that have the right to know their birth heritage, especially once they become adults. Now, most of you are aware as attorneys, our country has an interesting history with civil rights. There have been wars, people have died, and yet we still somehow think we should tell differently situated people, through no fault of their own, we have ours, but you cannot have yours. Why do we keep doing this? Have we not learned from slavery, women's suffrage, racial exclusion, internment, reproductive choice, marriage? If we don't offer access to information for donor-conceived persons who through no fault of their own were created with secrecy imposed on them, aren't we intentionally creating a separate class of people? And isn't that discrimination? Now, the NACUSL Committee on the Uniform Parentage Act, hopefully and undoubtedly probably had this in mind when they revised Article 3, as there's a lot of research evidence that I've mentioned, which is a very small amount, and the experiences of myriad other places and democracies, including the UK, I believe Australia, New Zealand, many other countries have faced this and realized that they need to remedy this. And as I mentioned, the state of Colorado took the first step in enacting their law to allow for donor-conceived persons to request their donor's identity. So I would tell you that I believe that Article 9, as recently adopted in 2024, is the correct response to impose secrecy and the remedy for this, for information that's being denied to donor-conceived persons. The one that Carol mentions and that other people might support, the 2017 version, does not offer a remedy. It further divides an already discrete class into those who have information and those who cannot get it. So in summary, if the current Article 9 approved by the Uniform Law Commission is not included in Hawaii's draft, in my opinion, the rights of a discrete class of individuals, donor-conceived persons, will continue to be trampled. Whereas in contrast, if Article 9 is included, the rights of discrete classes of individuals, donors, and legal parents will not be diminished. They don't lose in this. When laws promote openness, the culture of secrecy has nowhere to hide. Hawaii could be recognized as a leader within our country, just like we were with marriage equality. And we're going to be recognized for standing up for donor-conceived persons by telling them, we have ours and you can have yours too. Thank you for your attention. And I look forward to any questions you might have later.
Great, thank you very much, Laurel. I guess Carol or Jeff, do you know who would want to go next?
I think it makes sense for it to be Jeff if he wants to speak because he was sharing in the same report as Laurel.
Okay.
Sure. I think it's a hard act to follow Laurel, but I do take a different approach. I'm going to make a personal statement today. As you know, I'm on this task force as a representative of the Hawaii State Commission on Fatherhood. I was asked to serve on the Commission on Fatherhood in 2021 to incorporate the perspective of a gay dad. Currently, I'm the chair. Though the concept of the Commission on Fatherhood is to encourage fathers to be more actively and healthily engaged with their children, the guiding principle behind the commission is to focus on what is best for children. It's about the children. I think that's why the bill creating this Parentage Act task force included a member from this commission. I also bring to this task force my own personal experiences as a gay man who pursued parenthood by means of gestational surrogacy with an anonymous donor. This statement is delivered not on behalf of the commission, but on behalf of myself. As a member of the Birth Heritage PIG, I've had fascinating and educational discussions with my fellow members, and I want to especially thank Laurel and Carol for showing their human side, and I'm incredibly thankful to both of them. Our differences in opinions are a strength, but it is in this capacity that I wanted to make this personal statement. I was 27 when I finally came to understand that I'm gay. For those of you who may not have experienced someone coming out, the hardest part of coming out is not to your family, friends, your coworkers, the world. It's coming out to yourself. I was lucky perhaps because I didn't have moral or religious issues to deal with, but there was one overbearing fact that was devastating to the naive 1990s version of myself. If I'm gay, how can I have children? How can I become a parent? I can never biologically have children and become a father. And realizing this, I went into a 2-year period of depression-like symptoms during which I quit my job, dropped out of graduate school at UH, and basically fought by myself the debilitating pain of my depression-like symptoms. But I did make it out, and partly because I never surrendered myself to my perceived inevitable fate of fatherlessness. And about 10 years later, I and my now husband began to pursue surrogacy. As I've learned, it's one thing to imagine having children. It's another to go through the process of trying to have children and then experiencing infertility or something similar to that. As a gay male, I will never grasp what it's like for a female to experience infertility in her own body or to be in a relationship with a female experiencing infertility. But my experience, which really is not an unusual experience for gay male intended parents, was not easy. And I'm going to tell you what I know about infertility from a gay male's perspective. And I would add, this was during a time when it was more common to transfer more than one embryo. Also, not all of my terminology may be correctly stated. I know what it's like to have a failed donor egg retrieval. I know what it's like to have a non-viable embryo development. I know what it's like to have a failed embryo transfer. I know what it's like to have a successful embryo transfer only to learn it was a false beta and did not take. And I know what it's like to have a surrogate get pregnant with twins. We lost our first set of twins just prior to the end of the first trimester. We lost our second set of twins only midway through the first trimester. Our third set of twins were ultimately our 6th IVF attempt. They just turned 14. 3 attempts later, our youngest son was born, now 11. There's a little picture of them. At the time of going through this, from 2007 to 2012, I believe this was simply about us becoming parents. There is no doubt that this traumatic process, which I wouldn't wish on anyone, strengthened me as a father. I've also learned that our story was really the beginning of our children's story. My husband and I understood the financial challenges, and unable to afford surrogacy in Hawaii or even the United States, we went to India. Ultimately, we took 5 trips to India, and like many intended parents, the cost was more than we ever anticipated. So were the challenges. We were making many life-altering decisions related to each part of the process. We didn't always make the right decisions, and I believe one decision in particular was wrong. For me, India represents a place where dreams ultimately come true. Our children are amazing, and they're beyond amazing, and nothing in the world would ever make me want different children. It's simply not an option. They're the children that were meant to be, even if they weren't born in that first or other failed attempts. We did anything not to give up, and we kept trying. But if there's anything I could change, it is the ability to know who their anonymous Indian egg donor is. That was the most significant wrong decision we made. We may never know or connect with our anonymous egg donor. I expect my children's curiosity to grow, and there's no doubt that I already feel like a failure as a parent at how little I will be able to provide my children about their donor in the event their curiosity does increase. I do not believe that updating the Parentage Act to require the availability of confidential donor identification for future children negates the existence of my children, nor does it imply that they should not exist to begin with. They already exist. I would never replace them. However, there's no question that if I were to do it again, I would find a way to proceed with an identifiable donor. Again, to stress, this belief does not minimize the existence of my or any other children. I noticed that every single piece of testimony submitted for today's meeting is in favor of the 2024 updated Article 9, and I want to thank those who have submitted testimony. Let's strengthen the law for the benefit of those children who have not yet been born. Let's allow donor-conceived children to complete their own story should they choose to learn about their donor parents. I wish I could provide that opportunity for my children.
Thank you very much, Jeff. I think that was, yeah, we appreciate that. Okay, Carol, do you want to share your statement now?
Sure, I can speak as the Russian judge in the room. Laurel, if it's any consolation, attorneys get plenty nervous talking to groups of attorneys too, especially those of us in private practice talking to like the AG's office and judges and things like that. But I do appreciate you actually mentioning my personal capacity because something has come up a couple of times now, implicitly and explicitly, that suggests that somebody who takes the perspective I am taking is selfishly concerned only for the interest of intended parents and not concerned about the interests of the children we're talking about. And it occurred to me that one of the reasons it was possible to make that allegation is because I wrote my position statement and I tried in this forum to represent myself in my professional capacity and do not focus as much on my personal capacity. But since it also conveniently allows me not to repeat my testimony in my position statement, I will speak from my personal capacity today. Those who know me, and there are not many of you here, know that the implication that I am selfish in my concerns in this regard is absurd, and that I'm only concerned with the interest of intended parents and not concerned with the interest of the children. I have dedicated huge portions of my life to the welfare of children. I spend a lot of time helping Hawaii's children find families through adoption. I help Hawaii citizens create families through assisted reproductive technology. I have zero interest in ever practicing divorce or paternity law. Sorry, Judge Hall. But I am a pro bono mediator for the Mediation Center of the Pacific, even though the parties often drive me absolutely bonkers because I feel it is the best way I can contribute to the welfare of their children. And when I have two adults in front of me acting like children themselves, I have no problem telling them I am neutral as between the two of you. I am not neutral when it comes to your children. And so I don't practice divorce or paternity law. And I can't even say I necessarily enjoy the time I spend helping these people work things out, but I do it because I care about their children. So anyone who suggests I'm not concerned about children, I'm only worried about intended parents doesn't know me. And you want to talk about it over coffee one day and get to know me, I'm open to that. But for that reason, I'm going to address this from a much more personal perspective today. Both of my sons were conceived using anonymous donor sperm. I have done everything I can in their lives to dedicate myself to making sure that they were happy, healthy, and well-adjusted. I agree 100% with everything Laurel read about secrecy and the way that creates shame. And my children have been informed of their donor-conceived origins from their earliest years. Literally, my son was 3 when he first asked me if he had a daddy. And I luckily had just read the book on single parented by choice the night before and found the right chapter, and I knew how to respond. And they have both known from day one. And it has been a part of their origin story. And that makes a huge difference in how happy, healthy, and well-adjusted children are who are donor conceived. I agree 100%. Laurel, you cited a quote that said it's the secrecy that's the problem. 100%. I think the positions on both sides of this issue would be maybe not less heartfelt, but I think there are people who the strength of their feelings are motivated in part by the fact they were lied to by their parents. And that is reprehensible in my mind. And with all my clients, I urge them to make a full disclosure. And I tell them in this day and age, your child's going to find out anyway. So there's no justification for not telling your children from the very beginning they were donor conceived, and when they were anonymous donor conceived, that they were donor conceived through anonymous donor. I have also always told my children, your donor conception is your story to share. If and when you ever choose to share it, you are not obligated to tell anybody, but you are also not urged not to. They've been very open with their peers. They feel no shame with it at all. One of mine accidentally saw my OBGYN at soccer camp and yelled out, "That's my donor." And it wasn't. It was my OBGYN, which I thought was pretty funny, but luckily nobody understood what he was saying. They have thus far, their entire childhood, I encouraged them to know they could express any feelings they had to me about the fact that they had an anonymous donor instead of a known father. They more often than not kind of laughed at me, and they're well, what can I say? They're well adjusted. It's their story. They accept it. They haven't had an issue with it. I made sure, of course, they were surrounded with the love of their, Hawaii style, not only their biological relatives, but a village full of Calabash aunties, uncles, grandparents, and cousins. I helped them make contact with biological half siblings around the globe. We've got a couple dozen of them. We've visited more than a dozen of them when we've been out traveling. I've encouraged them to consider reaching out to their donor at the age of 18, because even though he is an anonymous donor, you have the right to ask at age 18. My 18-year-old son so far has no interest. He knows it's an option. He has no interest in pursuing it right now, but they are happy, healthy, well-adjusted, loving children who, for the moment at least, are not interested in reaching out to their donor, and that's their choice. I respect it. If they decide tomorrow they would like to try to reach out to their donor, then I respect that too. Through my work and my personal history, we probably know another 100 anonymous donor conceived children who are also happy, healthy, well-adjusted, extremely loved, who have more information about their medical background than I do about my own, just because the nature of the donor screening process and the information that's provided by the sperm banks. It doesn't mean there are not unhappy people in the donor conceived community and the anonymous donor conceived people. It does not mean there are not people, as we've seen in the testimony, who have problems with it, often exacerbated by the fact their parents lied to them, but not always, often exacerbated by very unfortunate health conditions, which makes you wonder about the screening process at that bank. But those kind of issues also, of course, arrive in the known donor conceived community and the naturally conceived community. Known donor parents can lie to their children too. They should not, obviously. It is worth noting, and Jeff, this relates a little bit to what you said, is, you pointed out that all the testimony we received is from people who are in favor of the, and I know, sorry, Laurel, I know you don't know this, like this term, but it's the one I have in mind, so I'm going to keep using it, the mandatory disclosure. That's how special interest groups form, right? There is no American I don't have cancer society. There is no national, thank goodness I don't have Alzheimer's society. The people who are happy, healthy, adjusted, contented with their lot, who don't, for whatever reason, have an issue, don't tend to form listservs. I don't have 5 people that I can send out an email to and say, hey, oh my God, people are trying to make mandatory donor disclosure. Please all write letters, And I don't fault the people who do it. Let me be clear. The stories are heart-wrenching, right? I'm going to go on to my next point because I think it addresses it. My issue with the 2024 version of Article 9 is not, as some people have implied, a selfish concern for the rights of intended parents. And I know, Laura, you don't agree with this perspective, but I believe it's a truism. My concern is for an entire class of individuals that we are going to protect out of existence. You can say it doesn't prevent them from existing. It just means the donor discloses at the age of 18. But if, like my son's donor, the donor would not agree to disclose, and I have every reason to think my son's donor is going to fall into that category, that person will not become a donor. So yes, those children will never exist. Every child out there who would be born in the next 10, 20, 30 years to a donor who is not willing to have their identity disclosed will not exist, because their donor is not going to donate if he does not have the option of being an anonymous donor, or OVA donor if she does not have the option. So yes, we are protecting certain people out of existence. Jeff made the point in our PIG, other children can be born. I can tell you as a parent, I don't accept that with equanimity. The idea, well, it's not a problem if my children weren't born because I could have had other children, and maybe it's not a rational perspective, but I believe my children deserved and were destined to be here. And they would not be. Anybody whose donor is not willing to have their identity disclosed will by definition not exist, because their donor will not be accepted by a sperm bank unless they agree that at the age of 18, the children will have access to their identity. There's no way around that fact. These kids will not exist. Other kids may be born in most cases, maybe not all, depending on the cost of known donors. But that's kind of what I want to emphasize from a policy perspective. We're not being asked to decide whether known donors are a good thing. I stipulate known donors are a good thing. I support any and all policies to encourage the availability of known donors. I support any and all policies to encourage the accessibility of known donors. I support any and all policies to encourage the affordability of known donors. And I support anybody who chooses to use a known donor. And honestly, if all those things are completely the same, I think there will be a cultural shift, and people will probably use, in most cases, known donors. But until that day, what we are being asked to do is to decide that this group of children, their lives are going to be so terrible because they don't have access to that information, that we need the government to intervene now and prevent their conception. And to my knowledge, and Judge Hall, maybe you can correct me on this, to my knowledge, this is the one and only group that we are asking the government to step in before conception and prevent their existence. We do not intervene in the state of Hawaii in the procreative decisions of parents, whether they conceive through natural conception or whether they conceive through the use of assisted reproductive technology. We allow parents to conceive children naturally or through the use of assisted reproductive technology at high risk for chromosomal abnormalities, sometimes not even high risk. Sometimes we know. If somebody asked Dr. Fratarelli to transfer an embryo that has that's already tested positive for Down syndrome, there's no law that stops that. Whether he has an ethical concern or not, I'm not even going to ask him, because I wouldn't put him on the spot, because there are plenty of people out there who advocate for the quality of life of people with Down syndrome. So, but we don't ask the government to intervene and prevent the birth of people with Down syndrome, trisomy 13, cystic fibrosis, hereditary blindness, deafness, dwarfism. And I'm not suggesting we should. I'm just saying nobody is making a decision, taking a position on the quality of life of those people. Same thing for people with family histories of cancer, family histories of schizophrenia, family histories of Alzheimer, heart disease, alcoholism. We allow children to be born into broken, dysfunctional, violent, and indigent families. We have no tests or standards in our state right now, to my knowledge, again, open to being corrected, where we say, before the child is even conceived, you may not conceive this child because their quality of life is going to be so poor that we don't even want them to be conceived, much less born. We're being asked to make that decision about one single group of individual. And it's a group of individuals in which, according to the testimony at our last meeting, less than 50% typically seek out their donors. That number may change, that number may be wrong. But there's 60% that we're going to still decide can't exist. And even within that 40, 50%, I'm sure there are some who are like, sure, I'd like to know about my donor. That probably runs a spectrum to, oh my God, I wish I'd never been born because I don't know my donor. But I'm sure they're not all at the far end of the spectrum. So for me, that's my foundational problem. How are we going to say this is the one place in which we are asking? It's not a policy question. I support encouraging the use of known donors, 100%. You want me to go hand out leaflets? I'll do it. But we're not talking about that. We are talking about asking the government to intervene in the procreative choices of parents to exclude the possibility of this one single group of people existing. All the other ones can. A child, you can have a child that you know is going to live 5 painful years and die at the age of 6. You can do that. The government's not going to stop you. But my children, my happy, healthy, smart, intelligent, loving children should not be here. And Jeff, I totally get it. They're here now. You love them. But your children would not have existed if this law had been passed 15 years ago. Neither would mine. So to take these children that I do know and that I see, and I observe their quality of life, and I see the amazing people that they are, and to say, we should try to stop kids like this from being born because they don't know who their genetic father is. You know, and that's without even getting into the whole, yes, I mean, honestly, we think we know who my son's genetic father is. It's not hard to find out. Some people, a small minority of people, may not be able to get to that point. We didn't even have to use DNA testing. One of the donor siblings' parents figured out based on the age of the death of the brother and the state of residence and a bunch of other stuff. We haven't reached out to him. We respect his privacy. But the bottom line is, there are ways, the medical information is preserved. These embryos are tested out the wazoo, which is not true for people in natural procreation. And they have ways of finding out if they're really determined in most, maybe not all cases. So to me, it's just that thing that goes one step too far. How are we going to justify legislating out of existence one category of people when we let everybody else exist? And even when you do know the donor's name, one of our testimonies submitted, I think it was today or yesterday, when she finally contacted her donor, he didn't give her any information. Even the known donor programs at existing sperm banks, California Cryobank has 3 categories: anonymous donor, open donor, known donor. Open donors have to answer one communication. Does not say what they have to say or how long the communication is or whether it's oral or written. And actually, in that case, it can still be anonymous, but they have to answer a communication. The known donors are not even required to answer a communication. You get their name, but they're not required to talk to you. So once again, we're going to legislate an entire class of people out of existence to get them a name of somebody who might refuse to talk to them, as apparently was the case for one of the people who submitted written testimony today. So yeah, you've got my professional statement. It's also very personal. There is no scenario in which I'm going to look at my children or any of their donor siblings or any of the other children I've helped to come into existence and say, you know what would have been really better is if 10 years ago we'd passed a law that made you impossible. I just can't do it. And if we're going to do it for these kids, what's going to stop us from doing it for everyone else? When are we going to decide, well, then children shouldn't be born with Down syndrome? When are we going to decide children should be born if the families don't have a basic income? Children shouldn't be born if their parents have a history of alcoholism. Where do we stop? If we start deciding based on our subjective judgment of what a child's future quality of life might be, that they don't deserve an opportunity to exist. So yeah, there's the personal side. I would love for you guys to meet my kids, and you may, because they may come and show at some point that, you know, anonymous donor born children don't have two heads. And one wanted to come today, but I told them with the nature of the way things were going, I didn't want to expose him to necessarily the things that were going to be said. And I told them, since they don't know you, they might think I told you what to say, but he's 15. So anybody who's had a child knows the odds of me telling him what to say are pretty much nothing. So that's it. That's just where I come out. It's not that I don't support known donors. It's not that I don't think it's better. It's not that I wouldn't encourage any policies we wanted to write into this bill to encourage the use of known donors. I think when we give the legislature the right to reach in and prohibit the existence of one very limited class of people based on our subjective judgment that challenge is going to be more severe than any of the other challenges children born in Hawaii face, I think we have problems. So thank you. Sorry. Oh, that's it.
Thank you.
Let the public roasting begin.
Thank you very much. And yeah, thanks yeah, to you, Jeff and Laurel. I mean, I know sharing those personal statements is not easy, and I think we all really appreciate them. Jeff, you have your hand up. Do you have something to add?
Yes, I appreciate your comments, Carol. Thank you for expressing yourself. I just feel this needs a response. It's not my preference to have more of a pig discussion in the task force. But one of our main differences is this belief that by passing this law to support future children negates the existence for our children. And I'm not an attorney, I'm not a philosopher, but I just so categorically disagree with this just ingenuous philosophy that has no backing and no support. But there is no such thing about legislating a population out of existence. I just cannot disagree with anything more. And I know you fixated it. It does not minimize your children's existence. I want to strengthen that. They're amazing children. Okay, I learned through my experiences, as I said earlier, you keep trying, and then you have the children that were meant to be, whether it's a first or a multiple attempt. But I just wanted to state, I could not find anything online anywhere to support that this philosophy is a legitimate philosophy. I just disagree with that.
Just to point out, Jeff, real quickly, I did link an article from a Harvard professor that referred to it as the non-identifying problem, and it's a recognized name. When you protect a group out of existence because you essentially stop them from being created. Just so you know, it's not something.
I couldn't find anything beyond Dr. Cohen's philosophy.
Well, he's the head of medical ethics department at Harvard. It's good enough for me.
He has a great position, but I couldn't find any support.
Jeff, your hand's still up. Are you okay? Are you done?
I don't normally use the hand function. Sorry, I'll turn it off.
Okay, sorry. Okay, I see Sean has his hand raised, but Sean, I was just going to say, I'm right now, since the PIG members have discussed, I'm going to let the members of the public testify, unless you have some other question, maybe not for the task force members, but for me. Otherwise, if you have a member or for the PIG members, we can ask them after the public testimony. But do you have a question?
I have a question for the PIG members. I can wait.
Okay, yeah, let's hold questions for them until after we give the public a chance to speak. So I can see that we have public attendees. I don't know if you heard my announcement earlier, but I'm going to be limiting testimony to 3 minutes per person because of the time crunch we're under. If you do want to give public testimony, please raise your hand, and then I'll have Brandon admit people one by one into the room. And you know, this is a chance for you guys to share your public testimony and statements. But it's not going to be a time to ask questions of the task force members. We're not going to be taking questions. We'll just hear you out, and we'll put you back into the waiting room and you can observe the rest of the meeting. And I also, I hope this isn't an unnecessary warning, but I want to keep comments civil. If there's any personal attacks or anything that's, that I see as uncivil, I'm just going to have Brandon put you back into the waiting room and not have any more comments. Okay, so at the top of my list, I see Kelly Best. Brandon, can you let her in, please? Okay. Kelly, I think we can hear you. It looks like you're unmuted.
Okay.
Okay, and I'll start your time now. So go ahead.
Do you need to be able to see me?
If you would like, it's not necessary.
Okay. I don't see where I can turn on the camera on my end, but I dressed up for y'all. Hello. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in front of this task force. My name is Kelly Best, and I was conceived via anonymous sperm donation. I am in support of adopting the 2024 updated version of Article 9, which gives donor-conceived individuals the ability to request medical history and identifying information about their genetic parent, the donor, if they desire to know this information after their 18th birthday. At 19, some health issues led to my mother telling me that my father had been unable to have children. I learned that day that I had been born as a result of an anonymous sperm donation. I immediately began looking for the donor. My parents were crushed by how quickly I began looking for the donor, but I explained that I could just picture the donor in a hospital bed. I was positive that he was somewhere dying, so I searched with a sense of urgency. While I hoped for their support, I knew the decision to search for the donor was mine to make. It took years, and along the way, I found one biological half-sister from the same donor, and we were able to determine the identity of the donor and contact the donor who was open to meeting. The donor was fighting a rare and aggressive form of brain cancer that has a slight genetic risk. He had already been courageously fighting cancer for almost 2 years and had undergone surgery to remove a baseball-sized tumor, followed by months of chemotherapy when we showed up. He was overjoyed to meet my sister and me. We got 15 wonderful months together that I will treasure for the rest of my life, and then he passed away at the young age of 48. Meeting him and having his health history available to me was life-changing. The donor's uncle shared with us that manic depressive disorder, now known as bipolar disorder, ran in the donor's family, and it led to me being able to be treated for it. I had been in therapy and on medication for many years prior to learning this. This revelation led to more targeted, more effective treatment. I have been out of therapy since last September and off medication since last July. If his identifying information had been available to me at 18, I would have been able to have known who he was for 5 additional years. I would not have had to have spent years of emotional labor searching for him, and I would have been able to get better treatment for myself sooner. We have since uncovered 6 biological half-siblings, bringing the total known number of siblings to 8. People think donors are young and healthy and will be around for a long time, but 6 of my siblings were too late to meet him. They wouldn't have been too late if they had been able to know who he was from their 18th birthday. For all of these reasons, I urge the task force to support the inclusion of the 2024 updated Article 9 and allow donor-conceived people to request the donor's identifying information at age 18. Thank you for your time and consideration of this matter.
Thank you very much, Kelly.
Thank you.
Brandon, can you let Kelly back into the attendee room and then bring the next person in who I think on my screen it's Jamie Spears or Spires.
Are you guys able to hear me?
Yes, we can hear you and see you. I'll start your time whenever you want to start speaking. Thank you.
Good afternoon, all. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in front of the task force today. My name is Jamie Spears, and I'm an advisor to the U.S. Donor Conceived Council on LGBT families. I am an early disclosure donor conceived person I would characterize myself as happy, well-adjusted, but I care deeply about this issue. The U.S. Donor Conceived Council is one of 2 nonprofits focused on the needs and interests of donor conceived people. We previously submitted much more extensive testimony. Prior to today's meeting, I just want to take a few minutes to reiterate and deepen some of those points. I know earlier we heard that a minority of donor conceived people are interested in this information. I just want to provide 3 studies on that, which are cited in that testimony. One shows that 82% indicate a desire to be in contact someday with their donor. Another study shows that most donor conceived offspring, 83%, want to contact the donor. That's Hertz 2013. And a third study shows that 77% of offspring were searching for their donor. All of those additional study resources can be found in our submitted testimony. I just want to reiterate again that this is the position of the ULC. This is conversations that we had during the study committee, where the study committee, including a commissioner from Hawaii, voted in favor of this update. The updated Article 9 protects the parentage, provides a predictable framework for donors with full informed consent, and meets the needs and interests of donor conceived people and their desire for the donor's identifying information. Allowing a donor conceived person to access the information about their genetic origins once they reach adulthood addresses the psychological and medical needs of donor conceived people while maintaining the privacy of initial anonymity that some parents may prefer. In 2024, donor anonymity is no longer a reality due to the rise of technologies such as direct-to-consumer DNA testing and facial recognition software. For this and so many more reasons, which can be found in our written testimony, USDCC respectfully urges the task force to include the 2024 Article 9 of the UPA in its draft parentage bills. We appreciate your time and consideration of this important matter and would be happy to answer any questions of the task force, both on this call or after via email. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. All right, Brandon, you can let the next person in on my list that looks like Nesta Johnson. And you can move Jamie back to the participant room. Okay, I see Nesta's joined.
Good evening. Can you all see and hear me all right?
Yes, we can. I will start your timer whenever you want to start speaking.
I'm ready to go.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Nesta N. Johnson. I am an LGBTQ+ family law attorney with the National Center for Lesbian Rights. NCLR is a national legal organization committed to advancing the civil and human rights of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer people and their families through litigation, legislation, policy, and public education. I participate as an observer with the Uniform Law Commission in connection with the Uniform Parentage Act, including with the recent Gamete Donor Identification Study Committee. NCLR supports enactment of the full Uniform Parentage Act in its current form, including the recent update to Article 9. I want to convey clearly that NCLR recognizes, shares, and has frequently echoed the concerns that some stakeholders have expressed here regarding the importance of secure legal parentage for non-genetic parents and their children, the real risks to families, including many LGBTQ+ families, posed by a lack of clear and robust protection for children conceived through assisted reproduction and their parents, and the importance of treating all families equally under the law, regardless of how they were created. NCLR opposes legislation which could jeopardize family security and opposes donor identity release to minors. Importantly, UPA Article 9 applies to the ART industry, gamete banks, and fertility clinics. NCLR would oppose any legislation regulating private reproductive choices. It is crucial that any provision mandating identity release be part of a comprehensive statutory framework which clearly provides that donors are not parents under the law and protects parent-child relationships regardless of genetic connection. NCLR believes the 2024 UPA strikes an appropriate balance between the needs and interests of adult donor-conceived persons, people acting as gamete providers, recipient parents, and minor children. Thank you for hearing my testimony.
Thank you very much, Nesta. All right, I see we have one more hand raised. It's, oh, maybe two. The first on my screen is Cindy Spires. Brandon, can you let her in, please? Hey, Cindy, oh,
Sorry about that.
no, okay, we can hear you. Are you having trouble with your camera, or do you want to? Oh, there you are. Okay, we can see
Yeah.
you now.
So, good afternoon, and same last name as my daughter who was speaking earlier. So just take a moment to like, wow. Thank you for allowing me to testify on this important topic. My name is Cindy Spears, and I'm here today in support of including the 2024 updated version of Article 9 in the draft parentage law. I'm the parent of 4 donor-conceived children, all conceived with the same anonymous sperm donor. In the mid-90s, as a gay woman looking to start a family of my own, I was acutely aware of the political and legal environment. I was aware of lesbians who, after coming out, lost custody of their children to their heterosexual ex-husbands. I selected an anonymous donor out of fear of losing custody of my children in the future. In 2006, my then partner and I had my youngest daughter. We used the same donor, and my daughter was my partner was the biological and gestational mother to my 4th daughter. Unfortunately, upon our separation, the fear that I had held on to for more than a decade became my reality. I lost custody of my child due to the lack of parentage protections for same-sex couples. Despite our daughter being planned after our union, born within our relationship, and raised by both of us since birth, I had no legal rights to her under the law. Losing custody and being separated from her has forever changed my life. I cannot stress to you enough how important it is to modernize the parentage laws to ensure that that never happens to another mother. As heartbreaking as that situation was, it does not change my feelings about anonymous donation. I tried to lock down my little family by using an anonymous donor. Not only did this not work, I have significant regret about this decision. At the time, I did not realize how important having the donor's identity may be to some of my children. I did everything I could to make the nature of their conception not matter. I told them from a young age and represented the donor as a product I needed to have them, and that I bought from a store. I believed a parent had the right to decide what, if any, information a donor-conceived person should be able to access about the donor. I, like the position statement of Ms. Lockwood on this matter, was wrong. I am burdened with the knowledge that through my actions, I attempted to deny my children information they desired and needed for their emotional well-being and identity formation. I can tell you that sitting here today, my daughter is a better person having identified and connected with her donor. She has been able to obtain answers to questions she has asked since she was a little girl, questions I could have never answered. Identity disclosure at age 18 does not affect parentage protections and provides important information for donor-conceived people like my children. I urge the task force to hear the voices of families like mine and include the 2024 Article 9 in the draft parentage law. Thank you for your time and consideration on this issue.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry I mispronounced your last name earlier, but thank you for your
Okay.
testimony.
All good. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, I have one more hand raised. It looks like Emily Goulet, MD. Brandon, could you let her in, please? I'm sorry, we can't hear you. Oh, there you are. Oh, you're very soft. Is there anything you can do to make your sound higher? No, sorry. Yeah, we can barely hear. And now it's muted.
Can you hear me better now?
No.
It's really soft. Is there any way to raise your volume? It's like you hear a tiny little bit from her.
I can hear it a little.
I can
Oh, it did get a little better and then it went down again.
audio, but this is the same setup I use every day for telehealth. If I speak up, can you hear me better?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for allowing me to join today. I am here as a mother of 2 donor-conceived children. I chose an anonymous donor with an open ID. So when my children, 12 years, my children can decide whether or not they want to know who their donor was. Listening to all of the testimony today and reading all of the statements, one of the recurring themes that I identify is that the issue is not just about the secrecy, but of individuals wanting more information. They want that medical history. They want that relationship. Disclosing identity is not a medical history. The donor banks provide a comprehensive donor history, and I have a primary concern with I am not aware of any other situation out there where a member of the public is compelled to disclose both their HIPAA protected information and their identity into the public. Another concern I have that wasn't talked a lot about today, I have some genetics training through my medical training. I'm not a geneticist, but commonly in these open donor discussions, there's this concern about consanguinity and what if 2 donor-conceived children accidentally develop a romantic relationship with their donor-conceived half-brother or half-sister. From a genetic standpoint, the chances of this are very small as far as them meeting. B, as long as they're not full brothers, full sisters, from a genetic standpoint, there's not a very large concern about the results of their offspring. We know internationally from small villages that there can be some degree of consanguinity, and it does not result necessarily in bad outcomes in their offspring. And so I wanted to put that out there. As much as our society frowns upon that from a medical perspective, it's not a problem. And we see many individuals that come with some of that in their pedigree and history. Not every donor finding excursion has a happy ending. I agree with Carol Lockwood that I'm not here to impose any other barriers upon people trying to have a family, trying to have children. Having children is a basic human right, and asking them to go through any additional hardships that other couples don't have to go through. People can have for example, I often ask my patients, what about your father? What's their medical history? And I often get this response, I don't know. I mean, I'm close with my dad, but we don't talk about these things at home. So simply knowing the identity doesn't necessarily disclose what I think is ultimately driving a lot of the difficulty in the situation.
Thank you very much.
You're on, I'm sorry, I cannot hear you now, but
Oh.
I hope you can hear me.
Yes, I
can see
could
that
hear
you're
you.
speaking.
Yeah, thank you very much. So that it's a little over, yeah, we're at 3 minutes. So thank you for your statements. Brandon, I don't think anyone else is raising their hand. So at this point, we can go back to the task force members. And I know Sean had a question. Maybe we want to start with Sean's question.
Thanks. Sorry, you guys can't see me. I haven't been able to figure that out. So yeah, I was curious if there was information out there around how this would impact. I think this was to Carol's point about potentially donors not donating anymore. Is there? And I think I understood. I think I understood some of the testimony to be that cryobanks are already implementing some policy like this and not taking donated gametes where they're not already consenting to disclosure of identity at 18. But you know, correct me if I'm wrong there. But I'm hoping that there maybe is some body of data around you know before and after those policies have been implemented and how that's impacting the availability. You know, whether certain donors are now no longer donating because they can't be anonymous. And I guess related to that too, sorry, this is a bit meandering. That's one. Related to that, just how it would potentially be impacting intended parents who are, if this is no longer an avenue that they can pursue. Is there any data on that other than anecdotal?
I can take a stab at it, but it's not super helpful. I will say that, first of all, I have a full-time job and I'm a single parent to 2 kids. So my ability to engage in truly intensive research on this is not what it would be if I were, retired or a full-time advocate. I came across a bunch of articles and really it's very muddled. There are places that say, well, there was an initial reduction and then it picked back up again. And there are other places that say, well, there wasn't, it didn't seem like to be that much of a shift. And there are other articles that say, actually there was a pretty clear shift and then it was compensated for in this way or that way. And so it's very hard to get a definitive figure on it. In general, it seems to bear out that there's at least initially a shift. Once again, it came down in the articles I read to a bunch of policy recommendations to try to encourage a culture of disclosure and encourage a culture of using known donors and, ideally encourage a culture of not charging double for known donors like they do right now at California Cryobank. And but it was very hard to pin down because there were different, they'd say, well, this is what happened in the United Kingdom, but oh yeah, the United Kingdom system is different and they import a lot of their sperm. And I think that was what Courtney told us at the last meeting. And then there was, and this is what happened in Norway, but the culture in Norway is different. So it's very hard to tell other than anecdotally. I can say anecdotally, we're confident our donor would not have donated because he has had the opportunity to have contact and has not taken advantage of that opportunity. And in fact, really appears to be actively limiting his social media footprint and everything else. I think he doesn't want to know. So it clearly would affect some. I don't think there are definitive figures out there. I think people can cherry pick numbers, but unless there's a comprehensive study, it's hard to say for sure. But intuitively, I can't remember who it was. One of the people testified said something like 97% of the people that in a study were anonymous donors or something. The process has relied very heavily on anonymous donors for a very long time. So it would be a significant culture shift that I think is logical to assume would make some change, and in some cases have been proven to make a change. But it's very hard to get definitive stats because every place is different.
I mean,
sorry, I
any
can't
other
be more
comment
definitive
on it. If anybody else wants to comment on that, that'd be fine too. But that was my question. Thanks.
Sorry, before we have more discussion, I just wanted to say, like, for the purpose of what I wanted to do today, like, we're obviously not taking a vote right now on what position to adopt, but it seems like the birth heritage pig is kind of at an impasse here about what they would ultimately recommend to the task force to put into our final report. I mean, it looks like you guys have two folks on the side of adopting Article 9. You have Carol, who's against it, and then the other two haven't really put forth a strong position, right? So if it went forward right now before the task force, what we would be voting on hypothetically would be to adopt this, the slight majority position with Carol. I think we'd still probably ask you to like do a minority report to the legislature. But what I want to do for this discussion is to, if possible, kind of give them some guidance about what the rest of the members would support. And not to like have anyone commit to anything right now, but just if you're like strongly in favor of one position or the other, or you need more information that you think is going to help you make that decision, I think that's what we want to talk about today. So if you do feel strongly, I think you want to let them know, like, yes, I really support this position over another, something like that. So I'm not sure who had their hand raised first. I see Deirdre, Dr. Fratarelli, and Laurel. Deirdre, I think maybe you were next. Go ahead.
I want to thank everybody for all of their testimony and for being willing to share your personal stories, all of you and everybody who testified from the public. And the way I see this is everybody is right. You're all right. Nobody is wrong. There's not one perspective of a loving parent, whatever it is they've had to do to become a parent, that's ever wrong, and what's right for one family may not be right for another. So I just wanted to say that out loud because I really felt like everybody's heart is in the right place. If you're taking time out of your day to participate as a member of the public, those of us who are volunteering for this task force, we're all doing it because we care. And I just wanted to reiterate how I felt. Really appreciate everybody's being willing to share their stories, and especially the members of the public who've taken, time out of their day to tell us about their lives and what it means. So my question was actually reiterating Sean's question. And from working on legislation in the past, I am a very emotional person, but when it comes to legislation, I'm all pragmatics. So I really do want to know, and I wonder whether Dr. Fratarelli might know this, does it cost more to get a known donor? How much more does it cost? Because I'm concerned about the pure pragmatics of access. And I fully support, and this is my question that I just would like to know, is there anything that we could do to move this in the direction of openness and known donors that doesn't mandate it? Because I see the mandating it as the possible limitation of access. And that's what causes me concern. It's not the ultimate policy, which I understand and support the same way that Carol articulated. It's just pure pragmatics. Is it going to make it harder or more expensive for people who need these services to have the kids that they want? And if the answer to that is yes, then my answer is it should not be included because we're not there yet. So then the second question becomes, is there anything that we could do that would move it in the direction of that, support it in some other way that doesn't go as far as mandating it? And then one thing that I did want to point out, and I did look up from the attachments, it occurred to me about retroactivity, and the draft as currently written from the Uniform Parentage Act is as it must be, not retroactive. It would only be for gametes collected after a certain date. So it is inevitable that you will wind up, even if this law was enacted, you will wind up with a class of people who will not get the benefit of it because the gametes were collected before that date. I was thinking about it. I don't think there would be any constitutional way to retroactively change the conditions on which somebody gave their gametes. I'm basically certain that would be unconstitutional. So the state would never even attempt that. But I want to point out that there's something inherent in that. Even if you went in that direction, you're still going to wind up with people who would not receive the benefit of it because the law would have to be prospective only. So I looked it up out of curiosity while we were talking. So if anybody can answer about the expense, and my concern is that, will it become harder to find donors if anonymity is not an option? Pure pragmatics. And I really want to appreciate everybody's testimony on this. These are very personal and difficult subjects to discuss. And so thank you all again so much for that.
Yeah, and just to add on to what you said, Deirdre, I mean, I didn't, just to clarify, I know we've said this several times, but this, if we adopt, whether we adopt Article 9 or not, like this only affects the fertility clinics and sperm banks or gamete banks in Hawaii. Like we have no control over whether people go out of state and decide to do anonymous donors that way. But I just wanted to, again, make sure that's something we all have in mind. So maybe Dr. Fraterelli, do you have an answer for Deirdre?
Yeah, a couple of comments really. And like Deirdre, I think everyone for their opinion. I think everyone's correct, in their personal views, and this is also very personal for many people. Seeing as a physician who sees patients who are wanting to have a child and dealing with donors as well, I can see both sides. There were a couple of studies in the past that looked at if you allow donors or make donors only identify themselves. In Brazil, there was a study recently that showed that approximately 1 out of 5 of the donors, about 25% of the donors, would drop out of it. This was egg donors. And then in the past, there was a study in the UK that showed that a third of the egg donors would drop out if they could not participate anonymously. And so certainly that would decrease the donor supply, and that's a concern. And I guess to be very clear, because when you have a donor who's being evaluated, really it's only like 2% of people who apply to be a donor actually become a donor, because the scrutiny is so much. They undergo a very extensive physical examination, medical history, family history, psychological screening, drug screening, infectious disease screening. You actually get you get more information about a donor than I know about myself as a physician, and I'm sure that most people know about themselves here. And you don't necessarily know the identifying information of the donor, but you know everything else that you can. And so there you do get that information. That information is given directly to the intended parent when they're going through the process, and then they can choose to give it to the donor whenever they. The donor can receive child whenever they want, at age 3 if they want, or age 18, or at any time. And actually, to another point that I think Deirdre mentioned, or somebody mentioned earlier, the egg donation process, at least, and the sperm donation process as well, donors can choose to be identified or de-identified. And when they're consenting for the process, they are allowed at this point to say that they're willing to be identified when the donor conceived child turns 18. Or they can choose not, or they can choose to be de-identified, and this certainly respects the donor's autonomy and the donor's decision rights, and so allows them to have some autonomy over that process as well. So there is that is happening right now with the egg donation and the sperm donation process. And I think there was a question about cost too. So cost, it does cost a little bit more for the to get de-identified, to get identified sperm. The cost is a little bit more, and then for eggs, it's about, I think it ends up being about $1,000 more for eggs, for like the frozen patients are undergoing a egg donation process through the donor egg banks. It's about $1,000 more per egg lot.
Does that mean that the donors who choose to identify themselves are paid more?
I do not know if they are paid. The sperm donors are paid more or not. The egg donors, to my knowledge, are not.
Thank you.
All right, I'm not sure who is next, but I see Laurel, Jeff, and Carol.
I don't know. I'm sorry. I was just gonna say I haven't answered that last question, Laurel. Where you could answer the cost question. Is it okay if I just answer that real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I included in my statement, I went to the California Cryobank website, which any of you can do right now. And under their program, right now it's $1,195 for an anonymous donor's vial. And it's $2,195 for a known donor's vial. So it almost doubles the price. And in my case, at least back in the day, Dr. Kosasa requested that I get 8 vials per attempt at having a child in hopes that it would not take more than four tries. He uses 2 vials per try. So back in the way Dr. Kosasa did it for me, we'd be looking at an $8,000 to $10,000 price difference. It would almost double the price to use a known donor versus an anonymous donor. And in my case, that might have prevented me from having my second child. I don't know. It would have depended what my budget was like at the time. I don't recall. That's all. Sorry, Laurel.
Thank you, Carol.
Okay, I guess I just wanted to fill in a little bit of the gaps based on what Sean and Deidre asked. In 1990, the Hawaii law was amended after we tried to get access for adult adoptees to their sealed records and created something called an intermediary system. And the intermediary system essentially said that for any of the parties that were involved in the adoption, the birth parents, the adoptive parents, if the adoptee wanted access to the record, those people needed to be found and to give their consent. Now, there were charges for that. It was $300 per person sought. Sometimes there were 4 people. Some people couldn't afford that. Not that I plan to go here, but I actually helped some people. I actually gave money to people because I thought it was important that they be able to do that. And not only did they pay money, but then they were still told, well, they said no. One person said no, so you can't have it. You can't have access. So when we talk about creating classes of people, I've been there, done that. And it's pretty sad and it's pretty unfair. That's why you go or you don't go. And honestly, my experience with public policy is sometimes you have to go and bring people along with you, kicking and screaming sometimes, but that's how you get it done. No one is ever going to agree, particularly with minority rights issue. The majority is never going to say, oh yeah, let's all go for it. That's just mathematically impossible. And that's, to me, what we have to do here. Because if we do the 2017 version, it looks to me just like the intermediary system we already tried here back in the 90s. And some people got and some people didn't. And it's not because, I don't know, maybe I sound disgruntled. I actually had a very lovely childhood. It's just, I wanted the information. I told the Birth Heritage Group, I cannot tell you why. Maybe I should loan my brain to science, so someone can study it. I'm a curious person. Intellectually, I guess I can just put 2 and 2 together, and I just figured it out early, like, well, wait a minute. So, that's the challenge. We don't know who's going to want to know and who's not going to want to know. And it's not necessarily because people were abused or they had a bad childhood, or I don't think we could, it's not that simple. And looking for a person's identity goes back as far as human condition. The search for the Holy Grail. I mean, it's been written about for years and years and years. It's something that people want to do. That's why we have genealogists. People want to do it. Some people don't want to do it. But to say that we're going to do something half-baked, or that really it might cost a little bit of more money, it just seems kind of sad to me. And I still don't agree that by doing this, certain children will not be born. That's too existential for me, I guess. I just don't agree with that. But thank you.
Jeff, I think you're next.
Hi, thanks. First of all, I sit here in embarrassment. I just want to apologize to the task force and especially to Carol. Carol, I'm sorry. I had an emotional moment. I definitely put myself in that place with my statement. Sorry about that. I wanted to respond to something about Deirdre's question, in terms of doing something that makes something more expensive. Marriage equality, thank you, Laurel, for referencing that earlier. Marriage equality made employment more expensive. And there were people that protested because now you have to cover same-sex spouses for employee benefits. But it was the right thing to do. And sometimes the right thing to do may make things a little bit more expensive. I wish that, you know, for me, as part of a gay male couple, that $8,000, it was a significant difference. But when you're looking at $100,000 to $200,000, that's minor. It was nothing. When you're, I don't believe that cost should be a deciding factor on this this matter. The cost issues, you know, I truly believe that insurance is more of a deciding factor because there is such limited insurance, especially for gay males, and that's where cost would be resolved rather than a few $1,000s on the egg donor, which I understand is a lot for a single female or a lesbian female couple. But I don't think this is about cost. I think this is about doing the right thing in the end.
Thank you, Jeff. Judge Hall, I see your hands up too.
Yeah, just does anybody or can anybody explain why it costs more for identified?
My belief is that they do get paid more if they're willing, at least under the, once again, if all this changes, if the culture changes and none of this happens, great. You know, if it becomes, you know, who's the weirdo who wants the anonymous donor, so much the better. But I believe right now that banks can charge a premium on people willing to be known donors. And I believe it's possible the donors are also getting paid a premium for their willingness to be known donors. But I don't know for sure. Oh, and Lauren has a comment. Sorry, Lauren, I didn't read fast enough.
He says that I imagine known donor record keeping would also cost more to manage and maintain.
Yeah, I think that's the case too. And not only, well, actually, not only to maintain, but it's the you're going to hear from somebody. The threat of, not threat, but the reality is that you're going to hear from somebody 18 years from now, and you're going to need to try to dig up that data or find that data, and it's just extra work for, you know, whatever you know, egg bank or sperm bank that is, that, and so they're you know, passing that on now for, you know, they're passing that cost on now.
Sean and Carol, do you have something to add or
I was
question?
going to ask quickly, sort of in the premise of my earlier question too, is there information, do we have information easily available about just how many of the existing cryobanks, whatever the entities that this would regulate are already only accepting donor ID'd? I'm struggling for the terminology, but you guys know what I'm saying. Is it like 90% of them are already doing this, and so this mandate would really only affect 10%, or is it, you know, what would be the impact on these businesses?
I think the first question, John, are there any licensed in the state of Hawaii right now?
There aren't any in Hawaii. And I guess, you know, if we're looking at egg donors specifically, you know, if we were going to use an egg donor with a fresh egg donor where the intended parent would get all of the eggs, then we would just have to make sure that the donor was known, and the intended parent couldn't use eggs from an egg bank that were, you know, de-identified, I guess, or a sperm bank that was de-identified. I am not aware of a sperm bank, at least a sperm bank at this point, or an egg bank that is only doing you know, known donors.
There might be some moving in that direction. I think when Tyler, I forget his last name, but who was here last week, ODCC, whatever it is. I think he suggested there was some moving in that direction. And once again, I say so much the better. You know, if they do that, especially if somewhere along the line they're no longer able to charge a premium for those vials.
I think most of them, I think almost all of them are doing both. You know, are doing some known, but I'm not sure that anyone's doing only, you know, identified donors at this point.
And it's tricky what it means to be identified, because like I said, California Cryobank has this middle level where you're allowed to exchange communications with them once, but it's still anonymous, or you get the name, but the person has zero obligation to even exchange one communication with you. So you have a name, but they don't even have to answer your email or your letter or your.
Yeah, it's a spectrum.
Yeah. Sorry, that wasn't why my hand was up though.
I'm taking my hand down, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Carol, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a question. I don't want to, I'm not trying to cast aspersions on anyone's character or anything here, or throw a bomb into this thing, but just to understand, looking at this from the legal concern on what is and is not rightfully within the power of the government. You know, I'm curious, are the people who are comfortable saying the government should tell us we cannot use sperm from anonymous donor also comfortable with the government saying you cannot use sperm from somebody with the gene for cystic fibrosis? You cannot use sperm, you cannot transfer an embryo if it has tested positive for Down syndrome. I mean, are you comfortable with, if we're going to introduce the proposition of regulating procreation based on the future characteristics of the child, or even more, like not even the physical characteristics of the child, but what we believe the child's life will be like, are you comfortable with that extending to anything else? Or do you think this is just an exception that is worth making, and that it's okay legally to make this one exception? Sorry, I know it's like I said, I'm not trying to throw a bomb in it, but for me as an attorney, that's what I worry about is where do we draw the line? How do we claim there is a line if what we're saying is it's not a physical characteristic of the child? It's what we believe a certain, like you said, we don't know which ones, right? So some could be even 90%, and maybe 10% don't want to know, but we don't know who's going to want to know, who isn't going to want to know, but we're going to not let any of them come into existence. Does that concern you with any other type of embryo or sperm, or you know, what if they've got genetic characteristics?
I mean, to me, that is a clear line, and I don't think, and I don't want to speak for everyone, I don't think that is a line that anyone's willing to cross right now, and certainly I would hope no one ever wants to cross that line. But for me, what is I think what's important to me too is that we're not saying if we adopt Article 9, it's not saying that anonymous donor children cannot exist. It like I think we've said, this is a regulation of the fertility clinics and the banks, right? But and maybe I'm not understanding this correctly, but I mean, people can still informally conceive anonymous children. I mean, or children from anonymous donors, right?
In the backseat of the car. I mean, I don't know how you do it anonymously otherwise. I don't. John,
My point is that we're not, like, by doing this, we would not be saying that we do not want these children to exist. I mean, that's just something I don't think.
Well, no, I don't think it's a statement of that, but I think it will preclude their existence. And that's the question. Are we going to do that? If we're not going to tie it to genetics, then what about other things? What about other potential future lifestyle concerns? What if their family has a history of drug abuse? What if their family is really poor and has 14 children? I mean, what characteristic are we going to use to distinguish this from any other case in terms of we're concerned about the life the child born of this gamete may have, and therefore you may not use this gamete? Whether it's physical, whether it's, that's just where I think I kind of come up against a hard stop.
Right. I mean, and I don't have like a principled, like solid reason for why, you know, to draw the line, but I just think those are so clearly out of the line that to me, it's not a concern that we're going to get there if we make this one, you know, if we're, for me, it's like looking at the harm to a person who is going to exist. And, you know, from what I've heard and from, you know, everyone's comments, it seems like there are actual harms that people suffer. I'm trying to balance that in my head with, like, you know, these more, what I would consider more like hardships rather than like concrete harms to a person. Like a hardship I would consider would be like the cost, right? But a harm seems to be like the psychological harm that people who are actually born are going to face or might face. And that's just like that's kind of like what I'm focusing on, just so people know. And to be clear, I might not be able to vote on these things because I might have to not be around for the next few task force meetings, but yeah, if it helps anyone, that's kind of what I'm focusing on is like harms versus hardships. Yeah, I don't know if anyone who's not on the birth heritage pig wants to kind of share what they're thinking to sort of give the pig some guidance. I mean, I know Deirdre already said that what she was looking at was like more pragmatic concerns, right?
Yeah, it's pure pragmatism for me. I think that my concern, like if you let's play it out, and maybe we just don't know, but it sounds like there's insufficient data out there. But if the enactment of this law would cause a precipitous drop in the access, and I don't mean a difference of $500, but like it's not available to couples who need assisted reproductive technology to have families, then the disproportionate impact that would have on LGBT couples is the first concern in my head, right? And I also feel, usually when I do this, my first measure in trying to, in my head, there was one principle when I was looking at our pig, which was, given the realities of human biology, how can this law be written to make LGBT couples as equal to heterosexual couples as we can achieve, given how human beings reproduce, okay, given that reality. And that guided my suggestions for edits, right? So if that's the case, I see nothing that the government could ever do that would do the same thing to straight couples that is being suggested here. There's not, it would clearly be unconstitutional if you were to go to tell a woman she can't hook up with some random guy and then decide to keep the baby, and then she doesn't even know who he is, decides to raise the child. That would definitely, that would not be permissible, right? And so I don't see how, to me, that's troubling, and it's turning the analogy the other way, meaning there's I usually have to look at the law and make sure that the LGBT couples are equal to heterosexual. Well, when you make that comparison here, I think people would balk at what it would take to treat the couples equally, right? Given the realities of how human beings reproduce, right? So I feel like I really am genuinely moved by everybody's comments. I really want to thank everybody. I think that everybody is heartfelt, sincere. I believe you. I think everyone is correct all at once, but I really want to know if there's anything we can do as a matter of policy to move towards or support anything. I mean, tax breaks. I mean, what does it have to do to encourage people to do known donors? Because I think that's clearly the direction it should go, but I'm not convinced that it should be mandated. So if I had to vote today, that would be my vote. No. Just because I'm concerned about the equalities. And in terms of the cost, I fully agree with Jeff that cost should not be the only determining factor. But when you talk about marriage equality and the additional cost to employers to having to cover the same-sex spouses, that's the cost spread out across the society, which we're willing to bear for the sake of equality. I'm talking about the cost that's a barrier to one family who that additional cost could mean yes or no for them, right? As opposed to the cost being borne across. I don't care if an employer has to cover everybody's spouses, go ahead. The cost is to the family. That's why it matters to me, right? Not the cost spread out. So in any case, I unfortunately have to go in a few minutes.
Yeah.
Lauren, do you have enough people to still keep quorum if I go?
If you go, we still have 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Okay, because I probably could get you another half an hour if it's going to cost you to,
No,
my leaving is going to cost you quorum.
We should be okay with yeah, if you're gone, we'll be okay. But yeah,
Okay,
if anyone
so I
else wants
got
to go, just let me know.
about another 10 to 15 minutes. And I really am really genuinely sincere for all the members of the public and everybody who's been commenting on this issue. I'm so grateful. And I really, especially for being willing to share your personal stories, that really means a lot to me. So I just want to repeat that again.
Yeah. Jerry?
Thank you very much. And it's a very tough topic that we're facing right now regarding the disclosure versus non-disclosure of the donors. But I do agree with Deirdre that the cost is of great concern in terms of it is not a cost to the society, but it's the cost to the family who wants to have this child and wants to have it going instead of someone off the street, but going through the banks, the fertility clinics, making sure that this child that this child, as a result of going to this bank or clinic, is going to be a healthy child. I think that is a concern of the parents. And to the extent that it can be offered by the banks and the fertility clinics with the way that they do their review of the donors, I think that you probably have the majority of parents who want children, if they can afford it, to go through the banks and clinics. Now, as far as the anonymity of the individual, if it's going to cost the difference between 1,000 and you're going to have several attempts, because the first one may not be successful, the second may not be successful, you're talking about thousands of dollars, not only $1,000. And you will want to, once you have set your sights on having this child, you will want to make those several attempts. Mm-hmm. So to the extent that it's going to be costly, you should give the parents the opportunity to have this child, but at an affordable cost. Thank
Jerry,
you.
Thanks, Jerry. Sorry, and this is just because I know Deirdre has to go. Can we skip just a little bit ahead to, I want to come back to this, but can we skip a little bit ahead to the assisted reproduction pig update, just to get any updates from you guys before we go back?
Well, I missed the last meeting, so I'm gonna punt to Carol and Dr. Fratarelli and Sean to do that. So
I mean,
too bad, Carol.
All I remember is I think at the last meeting we I think you guys are pretty close to like having your draft, figured out. It was just like the mental health consultation provision that you guys were struggling with. So was there any progress on that?
Carol, that I do know the answer to. Carol?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we had, or Sean can, anyway, we ended up with,
go ahead.
Thank you, Sean. We ended up with some further discussion and decided with our group, although we have not yet heard from Mihoko, but the rest of the four of us agreed that we would move that essentially to make it something that should be addressed in the surrogacy agreement, but not mandated, and treated it like the confidentiality agreement. So that was kind of our compromise that the four of us who were able to discuss it agreed on. So that was the only issue that we had asked the task force, and that was Sean's idea, this sort of elegant solution to address it in a way that was less than mandatory.
We did have one other kind of significant issue we were talking about this time, though, that we didn't come up with specific language to resolve, or the insurance issue.
Oh, the thing about the disclosure for the insurance. Yeah, on that one, okay, so we're definitely trying to stick with the uniform law wherever we can. And then, but the insurance language that is in the uniform law, we really were balking at, and we didn't think that that was appropriate. It was sort of requiring the attorneys to do this interpretation and a summary, and it was kind of a mess. So I can't remember where we landed on that, Carol, but we did make some progress on that.
Yeah, I think it was a similar kind of solution, which is it has to be, it already requires that the parents talk about how they're going to pay, that the contract reflect how people are going to pay for the surrogacy, and that part of what it should
include, and including whether
insurance.
There would be any reliance on insurance coverage. So we thought it was the kind of topic that should be addressed, but perhaps not in the exact way that the uniform law suggested. I think
it was it seemed risky to us, because it basically sounded like it expected the entire insurance policy to be summarized in the provisions of the contract. And we thought it's like a game of telephone. It's just asking for trouble to have people who are not insurance experts summarizing the insurance in the contract, as opposed to just being clear whether they purchased
What,
insurance.
what the
and-
parties' expectations were,
Yeah,
which we thought was
yeah.
the more important topic. Like, so if the parties have an expectation based on whatever communications they have, that the insurance is going to be covering, you know, a substantial part of the expense of the surrogacy, then they can say that, right?
Okay.
So,
But either way, that the independent parents stay on the hook.
right, correct, right. And we were going to leave the intended parents responsible regardless, right,
So
of
it's-
the. Yeah, it's not like
burden
a,
is on
it's
them,
a,
yeah.
it's a minor adjustment. It isn't like you know, it's not going 180 on the policy in the earlier draft. It's kind of a minor adjustment about how much you have to disclose about the insurance. So I think we're pretty close.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so we've got a draft in motion here, that would be ready to give with our intended suggested edits to the bill we received from Judge Hall.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we can go back to the birth heritage pig discussion and then I'll, you know, I still have to ask for like public testimony on your item, but I just wanted to get that out before you guys before you had to leave, Deirdre.
Thank you, Lauren. Appreciate it.
So okay, so back to the birth heritage.
Oh, sorry, Lauren, Sean
Item.
had raised his hand.
Oh, sorry, what?
Sean raised his hand. Sean, was that something in response to?
No, it was
discussion?
back to the birth heritage thing. Just
Okay.
another quick question. Can I go ahead or?
Yeah,
you're
go
in
ahead.
mid-sentence. Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to explore. I mean, you're just throwing this out a couple times, whether there's some sort of, you know, middle path, some, you know, things to move something in the direction. And I'm not hearing anybody speak up. She mentioned tax breaks. My mind goes to like maybe some, you know, required presentation of information in the process. I don't know, but is it something? I get the sense that maybe folks in the pig are kind of, you know, like it seems like there's this binary choice that's being presented, and that's fine if that's where we're at. Like I'm happy to vote on that too. But I mean about sort of whether donor ID is you know required, or is this the option of the donor? But yeah, if there's something short of just that, has there been any discussion about that? I don't know what that would look like, you know, to move things along, to try to encourage people to go the donor ID route. But yeah, can anybody other than just me and Deirdre, like that have been in that pig, maybe address that if there's been any other alternatives discussed?
Lauren, you want me to?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I too actually am pretty pragmatic. I would not put anything that has any fiscal impact in this bill unless you want to go through the gruel and the grind of finance and ways and means, which I don't think anybody here wants to do that. But if you do,
fair enough. I mean, we're talking about the ledge.
I would not
Right.
not muck it up with that, even though it's okay. But I guess the other thing, Sean, and to those who talk about costs, you know, when the US, including Hawaii, started running out of domestic babies for adoption because there were single mothers, and frankly, we had reproductive rights, we started looking at other countries, and it got very expensive, but people paid it. And I think, you know, what's happened with ART is similar to what happened when we started doing international adoptions. People that really want to have a child will find a way. And I just have to really push back on it's going to cost a little bit more money. Now, I do agree about the insurance that you folks have brought up. But again, well, I happen to think there probably should be some Consumer Protection Committee oversight on this, but I'll just leave that there. You know, that is not what the ULP is proposing. Okay, so I wouldn't bring in any more committees than you think you want to deal with. I can tell you, because I worked on the first same gender marriage bill, that there were a lot of companies who did not want to come public, but who are already offering same gender benefits to partners because it's a contract. Okay, if a company wanted to cover the same gender partners of an employee, they could put it in the contract. It didn't require a law to be changed. So frankly, you know, the insurance part, I mean, I think probably could be covered even through contracts. And if we start going down the road of changing the insurance code, some of you know that there always has to be a study about mandated benefits before the thing can even become law. So anyway, but I'm sorry, I keep pushing back on the cost, but I've seen this in adoption, and people that wanted children were willing to pay big amounts of money, just like with IVF, to adopt children from other countries.
Tiana, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to be sure that whatever kind of comes out of the PIG and then whatever eventually comes out of the task force is clear about the practical effects of what we're doing here. And, reality speaking, like we don't currently have any banks, correct? And does anybody know if is there a potential for banks to be developed here? Or, is there a difficulty? Is that why we don't have them currently?
There are no banks currently here, and the reality is it's just at least for sperm banks, that you wouldn't have enough of a pool to get to make it viable for a sperm bank. There are some, for instance, we have a small in-house egg bank that we use for our patients. We don't necessarily market that, but we do have that. We use national egg banks for most of our patients, though.
Yeah, so I would ask that some of that kind of consideration be included in whatever report is generated. And I also think that we would want to be including language for the legislature to understand kind of the impact of what we're proposing, the realistic impact of what we're proposing on state residents.
Yeah.
Well, if it's only regulating the banks and the banks are out of state, then there would be no one within the regulated group, which I think would have to be disclosed to the legislature, because again, this is a heated issue. I understand why advocates would want it in the bill, even if there isn't currently a bank that would be subject to it. So I wouldn't say you shouldn't consider it because of that. But we have to tell them, if that's the case, that there is no organization that would currently be subject to this law. If the stuff is coming from out of state, then there would be no one subject to this law, because the bank is outside the state's jurisdiction. And the proposal is not to regulate the recipient family, right? Yeah, okay. All right, I really do have to go. I'm so sorry.
No, thank
I want to thank everybody again for all of their time and their effort. And just to, and Jeff has his hand raised, I think. I'll just say that part out loud. Okay, thank you all so much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks,
thank you.
Okay, sorry, Jeff, go ahead.
I'm in my car. I couldn't figure out how to find the raise the hand on the phone feature. Sorry about that. A couple quick thoughts. I think it's fair to have the discussion switch to cost. It's very important, but I don't really think that the cost is what this is all about in terms of dollars. It's more about the cost to the individual, and we're talking about the babies more than anything, the children that are not yet born. But not being an economist, I don't think we have economists. I really had just one question to throw out there. But if we created this, if we did not approve or recommend the 2024 version, and there is this, sorry, let me restate that. If it did pass and there was only donor, identifiable donors, would the cost of identifiable donors go down because that was the only type of donor there is? I'm not sure that we can base it on today's prices. I just wanted to throw that concept out.
Yeah, because when you have different tiers, then you have different prices. But if you just collapse it to one tier, I was wondering something similar. Is it just going to be, then you won't.
Sorry, I was just going to have the exact same question. Are they going to raise everybody up? Oh, now we can charge everybody the known donor price because they are a money-making enterprise, or are they going to have to bring the price down? I have no idea. Yeah. Once again, I'm all in favor of the price being the same as it is currently for anonymous donors. I welcome any opportunity to lower any barriers to the use of known donors.
Dr. Federelli, I see that you have Oh, sorry, go. I'm sorry, Jeff, go ahead.
I apologize just for formalities. I was gonna say that I'm about to pick up my son, who's a minor, who may or may not have interest before the task force as a donor conceived child, but he's going to be in the car with me.
All
That's
right.
all.
Thanks for that. Yeah, Dr. Federer, before I ask you, I see like in the public attendees, there are some people who had their hands up, but I'm not going to be reopening public testimony. So if you do have something that you wanted us to look at that you didn't get a chance to say or submit earlier, you can submit something in writing, as it'll be late public testimony, and we're not taking a vote today, so we'll still have a chance to read it before we eventually adopt a position. So I just wanted to say that. But Dr. Fraterelli, go ahead.
Yeah, as you know, being a physician and not an attorney, I think I'm a little confused. So because if this is mandated, then my patients, even though they're using a donor from a mainland egg bank or sperm bank, they are allowed to use either unknown or a known donor, or they have to use a known donor. I was thinking that they had to use a known donor, but then I think that Deidre or somebody said a second ago that it wasn't mandating the intended parent. So what am I incorrect with that, or am I correct that the intended parent has to use a known donor if this is mandated?
You want me to respond?
Yeah, go ahead.
It applies to the banks, John. So it would be, it would essentially prohibit banks from collecting donations from sperm donors who were not willing to be identified to the offspring at the age of 18. So it's a regulation on the bank. So right now, the practical impact would be nothing on your patients who are using California Cryobank, Fairfax Cryobank, et cetera. It's kind of a different question then, because 6 of one, half dozen of the other. Do you pass a law
It's kind of a
because
waste of
what the
time
heck,
to
who
talk
cares?
about it.
Do you pass a law because what the heck, who cares? It doesn't affect us anyway? Or do you say we shouldn't be putting laws in the books just because what the heck, it doesn't affect us anyway, because at some point it may affect us. So yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
So
that's why I kind of asked whether there was like a possibility of, a real possibility of banks being developed here in the future, because this is a trailblazing kind of statute, right? Section.
John, it would apply to John's Egg Bank though, right?
Yeah, it also
right, John, it would apply to John's Egg Bank though.
It says it also applies to fertility clinics that collect the gametes. So if John is collecting eggs and putting them in a bank, then his clinic would be regulated. And I'm assuming he doesn't have like, I don't know, John, are any of those eggs in the bank? Are those like anonymous donors? like I mean, that's irrelevant too, I guess.
So I am collecting eggs for a bank on the mainland. So these are, but I also collect some eggs for kind of a private bank that we have as well.
Yeah.
So
yours would have to be known.
It would regulate the private bank, not the ones I'm collecting for the donor, for the mainland. Right? If I'm collecting eggs for a bank that's on that's a bank.
No, I think it would apply to anything you collect. I'd have to look back at the language, but I think it would be anything you collect would have to be a donor willing to be identified at when the child turned 18.
Okay.
That's your understanding, Laurel. I see you nodding. Yeah.
That's my layperson read, but don't accuse me of
Those are-
practicing law.
No, those are important.
Yeah, at least that would be a reasonable interpretation, I think. Yeah, and again, the flip side of that is that it doesn't prevent anyone in Hawaii who wants to have an anonymous donor to go anywhere else where it's legal and do that there. Yeah, so I'm not sure if we've given the Birth Heritage Pig like a clear view of where the rest of the task force stands. It seems like, and I'm Sean, and I don't want to speak for Deirdre either. It sounds like it would help to have some more information, if you're able to put this in the report, some more information about like practical effects of both options. I know, and I know that some of it's already in there, but I think that seems like what people are particularly interested in. Yeah, and just, I mean, again, I'm probably not going to be able to vote on these things because I'm going to have to probably go on maternity leave in like a week or two. But yeah, just from my perspective, I'm kind of a soft yes on adopting Article 9 right now. I mean, I think it is the right thing to do to, move towards non-anonymous donors. But I think there are genuine concerns, and it makes me a little bit nervous that we would be the first state. On the other hand, I'm hesitant about deviating from the UPA too. I mean, I'm sure they've had the same conversations we've been having, and they've had, a lot more time and expertise to deal with it, which makes me feel more comfortable about, voting for Article 9. But I think even if we don't adopt it, I think I'd still want to put into the report, our final report, something like encouraging the legislature to do more to at least work towards, eventually making it more of the norm to have non-anonymous donors. And, maybe we can pitch ideas to them about like, bringing the costs down, things like that, things that aren't within our scope right now, but things that maybe the legislature can do to help. But anyway, that's kind of where I'm at right now. I don't know if that helps at all, but Judge Hall, I think I saw your hand up first.
Yeah, if you're asking for where we stand, for me, I would probably have to vote no. I think nationally, the law should be changed potentially to require known donors, but I'm not here for nationally, I'm here for Hawaii. And in Hawaii, again, except for apparently Dr. Fraterelli, who has his own private bank and he collects for mainland banks, this is not a law that's going to apply enough, I feel, to make it worth putting it in. If there was a way to put in the bill in the event a bank were to open, then the state should regulate. I think that should definitely be a situation, but that's not our situation right now, unfortunately. But if someone wants to reach out to their congressperson and try to get this a more national directive, I think that would be extremely helpful, but I'm definitely not the person for that.
Yeah. Yeah, just to add on to why I'm a soft yes. Again, I think ultimately it would, ideally this would be great. But I do think the 2017 version is at least a step in the right direction from where we are now. And it doesn't preclude us or the state from going farther in the future. But I think because we want to do something and we want to get something passed, I think at least having the non-identifying information be required I think that's a big thing to do. So anyway, that's just more of my thinking right now. Carol and Dr. Fraterelli.
Sorry, really quick. I was just going to say, I don't know if it makes you feel better or worse, but from the people I've spoken to, the Uniform Law Commission was all over the place on this issue as well. So it's not like they had a clear and easy consensus on this issue. But I do think our PIG is completely united in believing that at least the part with the non-identifying information 100% should be included. We think that's 100% no dispute on that issue.
And I guess, yeah, just real quick as well, I guess in now understanding a little bit more, this is not, passing that it's going to affect very little to no children born in Hawaii, if that's what we're really worried about. It's so the effect on children in Hawaii is going to be, at least at this point, is going to be very, very minimal, because most people are getting eggs and sperm from mainland.
Yeah. Sean, do you have something else?
I have to leave soon too, and I wanted to just say that I'm kind of leaning no in terms of the mandatory disclosure thing after the discussion today. If that, to the extent that's helpful in the PIG and drafting what a majority position may be. But yeah, mostly has to do with being out front without a whole lot of data on how it's going to impact the population of donors, and not quite sure how it would impact not necessarily just cost, but just how it would impact the intended parent community either. I'm not unsympathetic. That's where I'm at right now. I do think we kind of need like a straw poll or something. I think you're proceeding with this impression that PEG has a majority position, but I think it needs to reflect the majority of the task force. So
Yeah.
I got to go.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. Yeah, we should still be okay if you leave, as long as no one else leaves right away. But yeah, so I do want to wrap up the discussion about the birth heritage pig. So I mean, I think you guys are free to still adopt whatever majority position you guys want. It sounds like it would help us in voting on that to have some more information on practical effects, like we were saying. But you know, you might be getting an idea right now of like what will ultimately be approved by the task force. So you know, take that how you will. But when we do vote on whatever final report you give us, we can, you know, someone can make a motion to adopt the majority position, someone can make a motion to adopt the minority position. So yeah, again,
are we going to have a majority position? Because so far we have only 3 voices out of 5 on the PIG that have even taken a position. I'm not sure how we're going to advance much more.
Yeah. So if you don't have a majority position, you maybe just have 2 dueling reports, I guess, and and the task force will still have to decide between those 2. Lauren, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, in response to Carol's question, I think we will have a minority position. I'm a soft no right now. I'm more struggling with this from a role of government perspective. I completely, I'm at the edge of tears hearing the 2 stories we heard today. Very meaningful, very impactful. This affects real people. From a public health perspective, yes, we would want people to know as much about their health as possible. If someone has the breast cancer gene, we want them to take appropriate steps to have the healthiest life possible and to make the wisest choices. But equity is also an issue for us. And I didn't hear enough today I would like to feel more assured that this won't have a disproportionate impact with cost. And to really sum up and synthesize some of the very, very good feedback and discussion we've had today, I think, especially Lauren, your comment about harm versus hurt, I think was very meaningful for me. The more immediate harm, I think, is access, is curtailing access, unless that can be dispelled or data presented otherwise. But if there are no banks to regulate here, as much as I agree with Deidre, we need tax incentives, a whole lot of stuff to make known donors the community standard of care. But the role of government in really, to Carol's point, limiting those choices is something that I'm struggling with. Although I don't think comparisons to the worst case scenario, like, well, you let alcoholics and have babies without regulation, that's I can't get on board with that. But that concept is, what is the limit of government? That and weighing the very practical impact. What's the net? What's the most likely scenario where someone will be harmed or hurt in the near future? So I could honestly go either way, but just from a public policy perspective, I'm a soft no at this point, which probably will produce a majority opinion and a minority opinion.
Okay. Thanks for letting us know.
It
Yeah,
definitely needs to be part of the public policy debate. Definitely. We're not solving a problem by having a minority report. We're hopefully engaging in a robust public policy discussion that I really hope gets resolved to help as many people as possible.
Yeah.
As much as I want government to help, because public health is full of progressive social justice warriors. That fine line of where government tells you what to do and not to do is something I'm struggling with. So I'm a soft no for now.
All right, awesome. Yeah, thank you for sharing. That's really helpful to hear. So yeah, okay. I don't want to, beat this anymore. I think you guys, it seems like you have enough to kind of finalize your respective reports, and you kind of have a feeling of where the task force is leaning. But this is obviously not a final vote or anything like that, and we'll have a final vote in August after we review the final reports. So since we already had public testimony on this, I'll jump ahead to the, I guess go back actually to the assisted reproduction and surrogacy pigs. So I know you guys already kind of had a little bit of an update. Do you guys have anything else to share?
I think that was it. I think we're just finalizing the minor changes to the language, sticking as close to the commission version as possible, and working on a report.
Okay. I know there are still some members of the public. If anyone wants to give testimony about the assisted reproduction and surrogacy permitted interaction group, please raise your hand. Otherwise, I'm not going to take any more testimony about the birth heritage discussion that we just finished. Okay, so I don't see anything. So for updates from the legal parentage pig, basically our recommendations haven't changed. What we did at our last meeting was just discuss some concerns that were raised by some of the members at the last meeting, particularly Sean, but he's not here, so we can't tell him our responses to his concerns. But basically, just to summarize, he had concerns about whether having this uncontested parentage proceeding would give sufficient notice to, to unknown genetic parents, or if it'd be too easy for someone to lie and be like, oh, I don't know who the genetic parent of my kid is, but I have this other person who wants to step in. So let's just let them do that. So we said we could probably address that by maybe not, I don't think we needed to make changes to our draft bill, but in the forms that go to the judges for this uncontested proceeding, we could have people explain why they don't know the identity of the genetic parent of their child, and the judge could determine, is this really something that I need a hearing on to hear more about, the evidence behind why there's no known genetic parent, or can I just sign off on it? Is it something, that I can, something where we don't require, we might not require additional notice or investigation into the identity of the possible genetic parent. And we also noted that, practically speaking, if someone finds out later on that they have a possible genetic child out there whose parentage has already been established with someone else, there is a way to challenge that even after parentage has been established. So the pig at least seems to think that having an uncontested parentage proceeding isn't going to necessarily lead to a lot of parentage adjudications without giving sufficient notice to someone who is a known genetic parent. There was also, and there's also a concern, which we've addressed before, about whether just having this uncontested parentage proceeding is needed. And while, we said it's not going to be super common, there are instances that the judiciary has dealt with where, you don't have a known genetic parent. I think we listed one-night stands or anonymous sperm donors, informally or formally. And the judiciary still handles those cases now, but they have to go through hearings to do that. And so even though these cases aren't super common, it sounded like it would still help the judiciary to have the ability to just decide these cases via affidavit instead of via hearing. And then having the uncontested proceeding would allow us to, like we talked about the last meeting, it would allow us to adopt the UPA's policy about denials of parentage without having to have those denials go through the Department of Health, because the Department of Health told us that's going to be burdensome for them to add on. So yeah, we do think that there's still utility in having an uncontested parentage proceeding. And again, it's not going to take a big change to the existing laws or even to the draft law to accomplish this. It just says, we just have something in there that says, parentage cases can be adjudicated without a hearing, basically, is all we have to do. And a lot of the work is going to come more in like crafting the forms that the judiciary is going to use to allow that to happen. Any members of my PIG want to add to that or clarify anything? Okay. Do any members of the public want to comment on what I just talked about? This is a report from the legal parentage PIG, again, not reopening the birth heritage PIG discussion. Okay, I don't see any hands, so I'm going to continue on. Okay, I don't think we're going to get to the drafting PIG formation today, but we'll, again, please consider volunteering for that. The internal deadlines and meetings. Yeah, just a reminder. So final reports of the PIGs will be due on July 19th. The week after that is going to be the meeting where we discuss those reports. No, we can't take a vote. Under Sunshine Law, we can't take a vote on a PIG report at the same meeting that it's presented. So the soonest we can start taking votes on what position to adopt is going to be August 7th, I believe. Yeah, Carol, do you have a question?
Yeah, just a quick question for the drafting PIG. Do you have to do the nominations or the volunteers at a meeting, or can people email you?
You can email me. Yeah, it's just I can announce it at a meeting.
I was just thinking that might help advance the ball if people were interested when I hadn't sent you an email.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. If anyone interested, just sent you an email, and if we have enough, great. If we don't, you can voluntold. And if we have too many, then we can have a discussion about that.
Yeah. So yeah, please let me know. I already asked Deirdre and I asked Mihoko if she wanted to do it too, but I don't think either of them said definitively whether they would. I would really like Deirdre to assist, and I think I'll ask her. But yeah, if you would like to, please let me know. And if I'm not here, then Sienna gets to appoint the people.
And just another question, we're still going to have our meeting on the 26th, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I assume no public testimony on either of those items. I don't see anything. Okay, and then the last thing I have to do is, again, because our sunshine laws are very strange, I have to clarify that even though, the PIGs have come and given us their interim reports, those are not the final reports. We still want the PIGs to continue on and do what they're doing. So just for clarity, I'm going to say, all right, thank you, PIGs, you're dissolved. Now I'm going to reform you and continue on to draft your final reports, please. So the PIGs will all be the same in terms of membership, obviously, and their tasks are still to produce final reports on their respective topics for consideration by the task force. Okay.
Lauren?
Yes.
Lauren Sorrell, sorry, this is a formatting. Do you have like a format that we can all adopt, to do these
final
reports?
report? I don't. I could try to find, yeah.
I don't want you to do extra work at this point. I just wondered if not, we'll just go with whatever we can come up with.
Yeah, I think if you want to look at the legislature's website, I think there are various committees that give reports to them. So
I know that.
Yeah, I was kind of looking at those for help, but I think it really is content dependent. So whatever you think is going to be the most helpful way to present issues.
Yeah, I meant for within our own task force. If you had a preferred format, then we could.
I don't think so.
Okay, that's fine. Thanks.
Okay. All right. I don't see any requests for public testimony on the final item. So we will adjourn. Thank you, everybody, so much. I'll adjourn the meeting at 3:32 p.m. This was a really good meeting. Thank you guys so much, especially Laurel, Carol, Jeff for sharing. I think that was extremely helpful, and we really appreciate it. And I know it was not easy, and I would not want to, talk about things that are so personal to me that you guys obviously care so much about. So I really, really appreciate you guys sharing. But yeah, thank you all and have a great weekend. And yeah, I'm going to say there's like a 90% chance, 95, maybe 98% chance I will not be here at the next meeting. So
Good
yeah,
luck.
thank you. I'll try to
It's
pop
amazing.
in whenever I can do that next time.
We want pictures.
Yeah. I'll put you on my listserv there. So
My clients can tell you I live for baby pictures.
Is this your first, Lauren?
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay, I just graduated high school a couple weeks ago, so
Oh,
mine too.
congrats.
they go from run to crawl. They go from crawl to run to an adult in the blink of an eye. So have a great pregnancy, and you'll be
I
a
s-
great set of parents, I think. Yeah.
Thank you.
I second all that. It went so fast. Now he leaves me in a little over a month.
Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, I'll try to keep that in mind when I'm dealing with
Yeah.
stuff.
When you're getting no sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah. You'll forget
It's
all
just a
about
different
it.
kind of anxiety.
Yeah, you'll forget all about it in 7th grade when you're just yelling at them. So don't worry about it.
Exactly. Or when they're yelling at you, better yet.
Oh, awesome.
Enjoy the cuddles, because is it a boy or a girl? Do we know?
It's a boy.
Yeah, mine both
Ooh.
turned into dudes and the cuddles stopped. And man, I miss the cuddles. Can I come cuddle yours?
That's a good point. Okay, I'll get a lot of cuddles in while I can.
Yeah, do it.
All right.
Oh, we're very happy
Boys
for
and
you.
boys and dragon years have very good fortune, Lauren, so you picked
Oh
the
yeah,
right year.
dragon. Yeah.
Nice.
Good
Well, yeah.
job.
Thank you, everybody. And yeah, I will hopefully see you soon.
All right.
All right.
Good luck.
Bye.
Take care.